Hey cruise fans, and welcome to my channel Cruise with Grant, where we talk about all things Norwegian Cruise Lines. One of the most popular topics on the channel, and one that I get lots of questions about all the time, are eating and drinking on board your cruise. Whether you're a seasoned NCL cruiser or you're thinking about cruising with Norwegian for the very first time, in today's video I'm going to run down everything that you need to know about eating on board your Norwegian cruise. So without further ado, let's get into it. In today's video, we'll focus on the complimentary options, which means the eating and dining options that are already included with the cost of your cruise. We'll talk a little bit more about the buffet, Oceans and the local, which is Norwegian's 24/7 eating option, and the main dining rooms. If you stick around to the end of the video, I'll also speak a little bit about special diets. So if you've got any dietary restrictions, how to go about that on your cruise. Today's video won't be touching on the specialty dining options that are available on board, like Cagney's and Moderno. I've made a number of other videos, and so please find links to those in the description below. Let's start off by talking a little bit about the buffet. And although it might seem really self-explanatory as an eating option where you can go and help yourself to whatever you'd like, there are a number of things that surprise new cruisers or even returning cruisers. While many vacationers go to resorts and cruises thinking that eating options are all going to be 24/7, it is important to note that the buffet has set hours for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Something that's interesting to know is what I found on my cruises is that the hours for some of those meal times actually can be flexible depending on what's happening on your cruise that day. For example, if you've got a cruise where you're arriving into a port very early in the morning, you may find that the breakfast hours actually are starting a lot earlier, as early as 5 or even 5:30 in the morning. The normal hours for breakfast service to start, which is the start of the buffet day, is about 6:30 in the morning. Something that was very interesting on my last cruise on board the Norwegian Getaway was that in addition to serving breakfast at the buffet during set hours, they also had an overflow space that they called a family buffet in the American Diner. This is one of the other eating venues on board. Although at first glance when you walk around the buffet, it may seem like it's just the same stations that are repeating over and over, if you take a careful walk around, you'll notice that there are some stations that are only found in one particular spot in the buffet. My recommendation is to have a walk around and get a look at everything that's available that day before you sit down to make your final selections. I have made a separate video that walks you through all of my top picks for things that I think you need to try at the buffet on your next Norwegian cruise. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. If you're somebody who loves a theme, the buffet also offers a different theme night every day of your cruise. If you want to know what the theme is before you finalize your decision about where you're going to be dining in the evening, you can look at the back of your Freestyle Daily and it will tell you all of the details. I also receive a lot of questions on the channel about whether Norwegian offers any unlimited lobster, crab, or shrimp nights. At least at the time that I'm making this video in early 2024, it doesn't appear that Norwegian has or is going to be returning to offering any unlimited seafood nights. Next, let's talk about Norwegian's 24/7 eating option on board that will either be called Oceans Bar and Grill or the local, depending on the Norwegian ship that you're on. This 24/7 casual eatery offers a lot of comfort food. So if you're looking for a hamburger, a nice sandwich, or a salad and soup, this is going to be a great spot for you. Something that's important to note is even though this is a 24/7 eating option, food isn't necessarily served continuously throughout the day. Between the breakfast, lunch, and late night service, there's actually going to be about a 30-minute period where they're turning over the menu. So if, for example, you're looking to order something off the breakfast menu, you're going to want to arrive about 30 minutes prior to the end of that service to make sure that you can get it before they start switching over. If you're like me and you're often hankering for a late night snack, it is important to know that Oceans and the local have a smaller version of the lunch and dinner menu that's available 24 hours a day. So usually between 9 and 10 o'clock, they'll switch over from the full lunch and dinner menu to that smaller menu that's served throughout the evening. If you're looking for something a little bit different though than the regular Oceans and the local menu, just like the buffet, Oceans has something that they call a blue plate special, which is the daily selection that's only going to be available on that particular evening. This is only available at dinner time, and you can find, just like the buffet, that the blue plate special will be listed on the back of the Freestyle Daily. Okay, so let's talk about the main dining experience that you can expect on board your Norwegian cruise. And if you've cruised with other cruise lines, this may be one of the areas where you experience the greatest difference. Norwegian pioneered something that they call freestyle dining, which means that you can eat anywhere and at any time on board your cruise. This was a big departure from the way a lot of other cruise lines had been approaching main dining, where they had asked you to pick a set dining time, and they would often seat you with the same group of people. In order to fill up a table, sometimes they would also sit you with other folks that you weren't traveling with in order to have a table of 6 people, for example. What I really love about freestyle dining on Norwegian is it does give you a lot more flexibility. If, for example, you had a particularly busy day in port and you wanted to have a late afternoon nap, you could opt to have your dinner at a later time. On the flip side, if, for example, you had a show that was booked in the evening, you could also choose to have your dinner early to make sure that you don't miss out on that entertainment. With all of the flexibility that comes with freestyle dining, also comes one of the big drawbacks, which is that there's often lineups for the main dining rooms. One of the reasons that cruise lines like set dining times is it allows them to control the flow of guests through the dining room, ensuring that they've got capacity and minimizing the likelihood that you're going to end up in a lineup. With guests being able to choose where they want to eat and whenever they want to eat, you'll often find that you'll get big groups all coming at the same points in time. In particular, I would suggest avoiding right when the restaurants open. You'll often get caught in a massive crush of people who are trying to get into the dining room first. As I mentioned in a previous video, Norwegian does have some great notice boards located around the ship that give you a sense of how busy each restaurant is. And this can be a great indicator of whether you need to sit down and have a drink and wait a little bit longer, or whether there should be space if you head over to one of the main dining venues. In addition to keeping an eye on these notice boards, I also get asked on the channel a lot about whether or not you can make reservations to try to avoid some of these lineups for the main dining rooms. On 2 of my cruises, I had no problem speaking to the host at the front of the restaurant and making reservations not only for the same time every day, but actually for the same table for the entire cruise, which meant that I would be able to spend time with the same server team, which I really enjoy, so that I get a chance to get to know them. On some other cruises, I've been told that you could only make reservations if you were traveling with a large group of 6 people or more, or that reservations were only permitted during what they considered to be off-peak hours. But on my last cruise, there were no reservations allowed at all. Full stop. So if you're interested in trying to make reservations, I would have to say, give it a go. It's definitely a great strategy to be able to avoid some of those lineups for the main dining room. You may want to speak to the restaurant manager to see if they can assist you. Sorry for the little bit of doom and gloom there, but now let's move on and talk a bit more about what main dining venues you're going to find on board. Most NCL ships will have not one, but at least 2 main dining options available. Usually one large main dining room and then a smaller main dining room. On some of the larger Breakaway and Breakaway Plus class ships, you'll find probably 3 venues, 1 main dining room that's quite large, and then 2 smaller options. In terms of what's available at those main dining rooms, the menu is going to be identical, so it's really going to come down to a matter of what ambience best suits you. As I've covered in my deep dive video on the top 10 things you need to know about the Norwegian getaway, the larger dining rooms often feature entertainment during dinner. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more vibrant and dynamic, then that might be the vibe for you. I did want to share with you that based on my experience, the service, at least at the dinner hour in the large main dining rooms, often seems to be slower. Many times I've gone with groups of 4 or 6 people and found that the dining service can take anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours. This is compared to 1 to 1.5 hours in some of the smaller main dining rooms. This can be a problem if you're looking forward to take in some of the shows in the main theater. Sometimes you can miss the start of the show because your dinner service isn't finished. I do want to say that servers on board are really great, so if you let them know ahead of time that you do have other obligations that evening, they will do their very best to try and make sure that your dinner service is wrapped up on time so that you can make it for your show. In terms of when you can enjoy the main dining rooms on board, they're open for breakfast and dinner service every single day of your cruise. Just like the buffet, I found that the breakfast service on board is quite flexible. So if, for example, you have an early arrival at a port, they will adjust the hours of the breakfast service to make sure that you can have breakfast before you get out and explore. One of the things that I really appreciated on my last cruise is they had 2 main dining rooms that were serving breakfast. One opened a little bit earlier and the other one closed a little bit later. I am not a morning person, so I really appreciated having the ability to have my breakfast in the main dining room as late as 10 o'clock. Now, lunch in the main dining room is something that feels a little bit special to me because it's only offered on sea days. One of the things that I really love about my cruise, particularly on a sea day, is getting to the main dining room for lunch nice and early so that I can get a seat right by the window and watch the world go by. On one of my previous cruises, I had the pleasure of talking to one of the food and beverage directors, and they shared some fun facts about the main dining room menus that you'll find on board. Norwegian has a rotating selection of 3 different breakfast menus. So if you're taking a longer cruise, you will find that the breakfast menus will repeat over the course of your cruise. I plan on making a video that shares my top picks for some of the great things that you'll want to try at breakfast, but you always can't go wrong with the salmon and lox bagel. In terms of lunch menus, lunch is something, again, that's not served every day. It's only available on sea days, and they have a rotating menu as well. There are 5 different lunch menus, so you may not see all of the lunch menus unless you're taking a longer itinerary. For dinner, Norwegian actually has 21 different dining menus. So during the course of your cruise, unless maybe you're doing a back-to-back itinerary, you're probably not going to see any of the dinner menus repeat. So if you've got a favorite, you'll want to make sure that you're asking in advance so that you don't miss out on that night in the main dining room. If all of these menus are feeling a little bit overwhelming, it is important to note that on the dinner menu, there are some fixed choices. Things like the herb roasted chicken and the New York strip steak will be a consistent feature every night. One of the things that I found very interesting on my last cruise on the Norwegian Getaway was that in the largest dining room, the Tropicana room, in addition to the main dining selections that are normally on the menu, they also had a special section where they were offering Cagney's steaks at an upcharge. Cagney's is the specialty dining steakhouse that's on board. I'm not sure if this is being piloted on board the Getaway or if it's something that they're looking to roll out to the entire fleet. I'd love to hear what your experience with this has been in the comments below. Thanks for sticking around. I want to talk a little bit more about how Norwegian can meet any special dietary restrictions that you may have while you're on your cruise. On one of my previous cruises, I had the pleasure of speaking to one of the executive chefs on board who shared a little bit more with me about how this program works. At most of the onboard sit-down restaurants, before you even get your order taken, your server will often ask you if there are any dietary restrictions that they need to know about. The onboard restaurant team and your server are equipped with quite a lot of tools to be able to respond to some of the most common dietary restrictions. For example, they should be able to help provide you with gluten-free bread as part of your meal. Although I don't have any allergies, I do have some food intolerances, and I've always found the servers have been really helpful, that when I place my order, they'll often go to the kitchen and they'll double check to make sure that the food is safe for me to eat, either because it contains some of those foods that I may be intolerant to, or it's been exposed to those foods as part of the preparation. If for any reason there is a challenge with some of the foods that I've chosen, they'll always recommend alternatives, or they'll look at ways that the kitchen can actually prepare a version of that meal so that it doesn't include any of those ingredients. If you're eating in the buffet and you've got questions about any of the food that's being served, or if you need some special accommodations because of your diet, you can speak to any of the chefs in the buffet and they'll provide the same kind of service. Now, if you're like me and you wonder how they work some of this magic behind the scenes, when I spoke to the executive chef, they said that in each of the galleys in the restaurants, they actually have a separate kitchen that's used to prepare food for people with special diets. So in addition to having staff who are trained on alternate modes of preparation for the common foods on the menu, they also avoid any cross-contamination with common allergens. Although there's a lot that the crew can do on the spot to try and meet any dietary requirements that you may have, if you have really particular needs, it's always good to specify it up front at the time that you're booking your cruise. On a previous cruise, I met somebody who had a low sodium diet, and in addition to making adjustments at the restaurant, they actually let that guest look at the menus ahead of time and specify the meals that they would want so that it could be prepared for them. This kind of runs a little bit contrary to the freestyle dining approach in that you did have to choose which restaurant you'd be dining at each night of the cruise and also the meal that you'd be choosing. Now that I've given you a complete rundown of the complimentary eating options that are on board, are you team buffet? Are you team Oceans and the local, or are you team main dining room? Please let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to check out the other videos that I've made about eating and drinking on board your next Norwegian cruise. Thanks so much for watching today. If you found this video helpful, please remember to give it a like and subscribe to the channel, as it really does help me out and motivates me to keep making videos for our cruise community. Thanks so much for watching today. I hope you have a beautiful day, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!